We're going to be talking about building up our faith. It's just going to be a two-parter because it's a little bit lengthy presentation here. And I think this day and age that we're living in now, it seems like it's becoming more and more complicated for people. The uncertainty of this world with the virus that's going on, the problems that we're facing because of the fact that we're not sure about the government, did people cheat there or did they not cheat? Who's really in charge and all kinds of things. So we have a lot of different emotional problems that we're going through today. And there's different people that probably feel different ways, the uncertainty of this life. And so it's hard to really put our finger on it, not sure exactly what you're feeling and why we're feeling this way. And everybody can say they have faith. You believe in God. You believe in His saving grace. You have faith in God, but how much faith do you really have? It's the question. The key text is in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5 through 7. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about there. I'm going to put on my presentation there. Whoops. There we go. So building up our faith based on 2 Peter chapter 1, 5 through 7. And the verse goes this way. And besides this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity, or Christian love. So it's interesting. So it's like I say, if you have faith, that's good, but this is what you need to supplement it. I guess if you want to take an analogy that maybe we all can relate to, perhaps, is that it seems like a lot of the food today does not have all the nutritional benefits that it used to have. It seems like the food we're eating today, it's probably, if you just ate that, you probably wouldn't get all the nourishment you used to have. And the reason for that is because of the insecticides that they put on there. And maybe because of the earth has been overly harvested, I won't get into all of that. But, what I know about planting and harvesting crops is that the Bible was always very clear that every 7 years you needed to change where you were planting. You weren't going to plant in the same field all the time, so you have to give the earth a rest. And nobody does that anymore, at least not that I know of. I've asked around, because Texas A&M is connected to Palo Alto College, and I've asked them, because they're really into agriculture, and they say, no, we don't do any of that sort of thing, So can you imagine what it must be like to be constantly harvesting the same crops over and over and planting the same place, and you have only so much nutrition in the ground, and that's about it, I suppose they can add fertilizer and things like that to it, but it's not quite the same as it was intended, but this is not about crops or eating food and things of that nature. This is more about understanding that faith is like believing in the Lord and believing in things you cannot see, but you need to have more than just that. You need to build on that. You need to be able to add more things to it to make it stronger. And I think that's what we're lacking today. And I think if we had that, all these other things that they want us to throw on top, starts off to virtue, knowledge, temperance, patience, godliness, brotherly kindness, and and then charity. So all of those things you need to add, and we're not doing that. At least not too many people are. So I thought I'd talk about that. And we're not, as I said, there's quite a few of these things here. So I'm going to get into it as we go along, and not just this week, but the coming week as well. So how much faith do we really have? And I'm afraid that none of us can answer the question here. How much faith do you really have? A lot of people think they have more faith than others, but Matthew 17:20 says, he replied, because you have so little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. And nothing will be impossible for you. Wow, that's it. Very interesting. Not to be able to have that kind of faith. Well, but it's not like, well, we need to move a mountain. That's not really what that's talking about. Think about the mountains in your life. Maybe illness, maybe the uncertainty of your jobs. Those are mountains that are very realistic. Think about the big problems that we're facing in this world that we just talked about, the political climate, the health issues that we're seeing. They were saying initially, for example, and I don't want to get too much into coronavirus, but they were saying initially, well, the first ones that are going to get the coronavirus the vaccine rather, is going to be people that work in the medical field and people that are exposed to other people more often than others. And then we're going to get the older folks, and especially those that have, health conditions and things like that. And then after that, we're going to get the older people that are in fairly good health, and then we're going to work our way down. But are they really doing that? No, not at all. In fact, if you looked at the news this week, you notice that they had at the Alamo Dome, a whole bunch of people lined up to get their shots. A lot of them were young. I didn't see anybody in wheelchairs. I didn't see any older people. The people that were older, they just couldn't even get in that line, Probably got pushed out of the way if they did. So you really can't trust people to do the right thing all the time, And so we have issues in this life, but they're very realistic ones. Your mountains might be different from my mountains, but they're mountains there. They are, and a mountain is nothing more than something immovable, insurmountable, something that is greater than yourself, something that seems like will never move and be resolved unless you really have the faith to do it. And so sometimes, when I talk to people about having greater faith, when they have all these problems that they're facing, you and I can't fix everybody's problems. That's not realistic, We can't take God's place. But what we can do is increase our faith so that we can actually become more and more the type of people that can deal with the problems that they're facing in this life with a more realistic manner. Now, I got into the point where I don't really trust in my own self to have all the answers, because sometimes we're put into situations where it seems like the expectations of us are greater than what we can actually, resolve and deal with. But it seems to me that if we trusted in the Lord more than ourselves and really had faith in him and just kind of give it all to God, we would have less and less worry. If you find yourself worrying constantly, if you find yourself constantly afraid and unsure and depressed, you're probably trying to deal with these problems on your own, and you become more and more frustrated. You become more and more worried, and you become less sure of what's going on. But when your faith is in something greater than yourself, especially the will of the Lord, you're going to do a lot better than what you're doing now. Let's look at the very first thing that we need to add to our faith. Let's see, next. Okay. And that is virtue. Add to your faith virtue. So we're going to start out adding with that. Supplementing our faith with that, I should say. Strong's Bible Concordance, and every time I mention Strong's, that's what I'm talking about. It's a mouthful, but it's a Bible Concordance. I looked it up and it says, any particular moral excellence such as modesty, purity, and I think the one that goes very well with it is in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatever things are honest, whatever things are just, and whatsoever things are pure, and whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report, if there's be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think about these things. So our focus needs not to be on what's wrong, but what's right. And that's really what we were talking about this morning. It's not like the commandments are no longer important. It's more like the focus is not so much in what I'm doing wrong, but what I can do right. Isn't that really what that's about? So the commandments still are valid. They're still important. But instead of trying to get constantly reminded of how I fail all the time and how much I need Christ and how lacking I am in perfection, I concentrate on things that are right, that are going right with my life. And a lot of times we don't focus on the good things. If you got little kids, think about them, because those are blessings from God. Think about everything that is going well with your life. Think about all the things that matter. Think about everything that you can be happy about. Those are the things you should be focusing on. So when we start changing our mindset from what's wrong and the problems that are around us and what we can't fix and the things that we cannot do anything about, the Lord is telling you, add your faith virtue, and virtue means that my focus is no longer on what things that are wrong, but the things that are right. You see, modesty, purity, all the good things, anything that is worthwhile. He says, think about these things. So our focus should be on those things and not on all the wrong things that have ever happened in my life. When you keep thinking about everything that every mistake you made and everything that you failed in and the past things you did that were probably regrettable, all of us can come up with some of those things. We really can. But God doesn't do that. When he was burying or doing the eulogy for David, he wasn't saying about King David, this is a man that had relations with Bathsheba. He didn't say, this is a man that had her husband killed off. This is a man that was a very poor example, and he let himself go down the path of lust and pride and all these other wrong things. No, he said, this is a man after my own heart, whose sins are as white as snow. That's the way that God looks at us. And you know what? He wants us to look at ourselves that way too. He wants us to look at each other that way too. Because if you look at your husband or wife or anybody in your family that's ever done anything wrong, think about it. Would you want God to look at you like that too? No, if we're going to look and concentrate and focus on all the wrong things, we will always find that. We will always find something wrong. But the truth is that there's a lot of good things that are going on in our lives, and those are the things that we should be focused on. But virtues are developed through learning and through practice. Trying to be modest, learning how to be careful about how you conduct yourself and the things that you look upon that are worthwhile, that takes practice. The ancient philosopher Aristotle suggested that a person can improve his or her character by practicing self-discipline. You know, a lot of people don't discipline themselves. They're out of control. And while I believe that we need to be as transparent as possible, but if a pastor gets up in front of people and says, I have all these lusts and I have all these temptations and I have all these problems going on in my life. And I say to him, when I hear stuff like that, I say, well, you know what? You need to get right with yourself before you try to help anybody else. Because if you can't self-discipline your own self, how can you help others self-discipline? So we are always a work in progress. We need to constantly be working on our own selves. And that is a hard thing to do. So don't worry about trying to fix other people. Try to be a good example to other people. Now we'll be talking about physical exercise and things of that nature as well, but here's one element of that. Just as the ability to run a marathon develops through much training and practice, so too does our capacity to be fair, to be courageous, or to be compassionate. If you're always going to look at the faults of other people, then you're going to be lacking compassion. And that is not what the Lord wants of you. In fact, he looks at us with such loving kindness. And I'm glad he looks at us that way, because if he looked at us in the way that we looked at ourselves or others look at us, we're probably going to always fall short. But God looks at the good things about us, He always looks at all the good things about us, about the worthwhile things, about how he doesn't look at us at how often we fall or fail, but how often we get up, how often we keep trying, and how often we're trying to improve ourselves. And it takes tremendous courage to do that. So having virtues is something that we can develop and we can work on. And it begins with trying to look at ourselves in a different light, trying to look at ourselves in the way that God looks at us, and try to focus on the good things, not the bad things. And we should do that about each other, okay? We shouldn't just look at all the mistakes we made, because you know what? We've done plenty. And the Lord knows that. And he offers grace every day. And so we need Jesus every day. We need his saving grace daily, because we're never going to have enough of ourselves and enough of it in ourselves. So let's look at the next thing. And to your faith, virtue, and to virtue, knowledge. Seems like it's a little bit out of place there, but I'll explain to you what I mean by that. Strong's mentions that knowledge is general intelligence and understanding. But we're getting a little bit generic there, because I think he needs more than just knowledge about stuff, Yeah, I guess if you're going to look at some person with a lot of education, that they have a lot of knowledge, but the kind of knowledge that we want to lead to is going to be more about God and the things of the kingdom of God. But there's something about knowledge here as well, because you know what, I didn't, when I was going to Wayland Baptist University, there was something that one of the professors said, and this lady, she was more into the writing classes and the speech and English and things of that nature. And I thought it was a little bit contradictory, because I had met so many people that were very uneducated. You know, they hadn't gone to school, but you know what? They had a lot of wisdom. They really did. And they never went to school for that. And so that was admirable. But there was something about knowledge that I probably didn't really think too much about at the time. But she said, there are two kinds of people in this world, she said. And this stuck with me, you know, I won't take any credit for this one. She said, it is the Visigoths and the barbarians. I said, well, who's the Visigoths? He said, no, these are the people that are constantly learning to try to get better, trying to get educated and to be cultured, and trying to live a clean and decent life. And as they do that, they help other people. They become a good element of society, because they're able to educate themselves. And you know, you can do it, self-educate. If you don't want to go to school, you could at least self-educate yourself. You certainly can. She said, what the alternative to that is the barbarians. To the barbarians, nothing is worth keeping. Everything is bad. And they had no respect of people in society. And so when the barbarians came and saw what the Greeks did, you know what, it kind of reminds me of some of these crazy young people that were running up and down the streets and tagging everything and burning things down. These are the barbarians. The barbarians tend to destroy everything. And so they tend to break things down. It's called a cancel culture. Have you heard that term before? The cancel culture. Everything is bad. So they knock down statues. They break into windows. They burn buildings down. These are the barbarians that lady professor was talking about way back in the day. And that's what barbarians do. They hate everything. They destroy everything. They are antagonistic, and she says, then the only cure for that is to be educated. I always tell my students when they come in to my computer classes, I said, how many of you are afraid of your computer? And usually half the class raise their hands, because you know, some of these classes that I was teaching at the time, introductory to computers, and they said, oh, we're afraid of computers. And I said, you know why you're afraid? Because you fear what you don't understand. But when you have knowledge and skills and learning, you no longer fear any of the things that you're dealing with. It drives it away. It kind of like it reminds you that there was an element in history about the Dark Ages. Anybody ever hear about that? The Dark Ages. Back then, they decided we don't need all this education stuff. We don't need any of this learning thing, so we're going to just go back to the old days and nobody's going to learn anything. We're not going to have any schools or nothing like that. And so there was a period of time, a long, dark period of time where nobody read anything, nobody wrote anything down, and nobody cared about education. And as a consequence, they became very barbaric people, you know? And I don't think all the world was like that at the time, but the part of the world that was like that was very destructive, you know? And very superstitious. You know, you become superstitious when you don't have education. So let's just say that when you don't understand why you have a lunar eclipse, for example, you know, the people back then in the Dark Ages, they saw lunar eclipse and they said, oh, you know, there's a bad omen right there. that means that horrible things are going to happen. Oh, and they were all worried about it. So what could they do? How could they atone for it? How could they put a stop to it? Then they would sacrifice animals. They would do all kinds of crazy things, to try to undo it. But there was no truth to that at all. It was just a matter of the, of the sun going over the moon and so forth, and you couldn't see it and everything, and so it got dark. But because they didn't have the education, they didn't see that. So education and learning is something all of us can still do, but eventually I will get to what the more important part of learning that we should be looking at, of course. But look at this. Did you know that 80% of all the scientists that have ever lived are still alive today? What happened to the 20%? Well, they're dead, of course. Einstein's dead. But that means that most of the education and learning and knowledge is today. And this is, there's a reason for this. Because when Daniel talks about the last days, that he says that that knowledge will increase dramatically. So let's look at how that is going about. In the past 100 years, there's been a literal explosion in the increase of knowledge. The invention of electricity, automobiles, airplanes, and computers have all taken place in this and recent generations. The Hebrew word for increase implies not only an addition of knowledge, but also a multiplication of knowledge that is increasing exponentially. And that's really what that means. It multiplies. Okay, so up to the year 1845, we would say, if you would try to get it, a visual representation of that is like an inch. And an inch is not too much, right? An inch of knowledge. That's all they had up to 1845. Then from 1845 to 1945, just, 100 years, it tripled to 3 inches. But look at what happened in 1945 to 1976. And that's the same height of the Washington Monument. Wow, can you imagine? I guess I should have measured how much the Washington Monument was. Anybody has it, you can look it up real quick. But the point is, that's just how much it's increased. And we're not even thinking about 1976 to today. I need to go get my facts a little bit more up to date. But I can assure you it's becoming more and more greater in knowledge has increased. So that's telling you that if Daniel was telling us that in the last days knowledge will increase, just know that we're there, okay? So it's not a whole lot more to go, realistically. But let's focus on the Christian knowledge, though, because that's really what's going to be a difference for us here. Christian knowledge starts with a fear of God. Proverbs 1:7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." That sounds like the cancel culture again. That sounds like the people that are actually, hating everything, hating our past, our history. In fact, there's some of them trying to reinvent it. Proverbs 2:10-12 says, "For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to you, to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you. Wisdom will save you from the ways of the wicked men, from men whose words are perverse." So if a person is not really grounded in the Word of God, you're not going to know it if you don't know your Bible, if you don't know God. But here's the problem right there. The fear of the Lord. And I can tell you that with a lot of sadness, that a lot of the people today have lost the fear of the Lord. They don't fear God anymore. And that is the sad truth of the matter there. People don't care about that. It sounds like it's old-fashioned, and I concur with what Stan was saying earlier. People think they call you a legalist because you believe in the commandments, that you still believe in the doctrines of God that are based in the Bible. That's a whole lot of date stuff. We're all going to be hugging each other and loving each other, and we're all going to be friends, and we are not caring about all that stuff. We're just going to talk about all the good things. Sometimes you got to be very firm and preach about the real truth of the Lord, and sometimes you're going to step on some toes. Still remember somebody pulling me aside after a sermon. He says, "Your wife's been talking. My wife's been talking to you, hasn't she?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Yeah, because everything you said there has been coming out of my wife's mouth all week." And I said, "Well, no, the Holy Spirit was talking to me, and you know what? Maybe the Holy Spirit is talking to your wife as well. I don't know anything about your business at home, but if you're convicted of that, if you feel that maybe God is talking to you, you need to start paying attention and start fearing the Lord and start trusting His word. The Lord can give us wisdom and knowledge and instruction, and sometimes it comes from different, sources. It could come from your own spouse, but it can also come from your children. Can come from your friends, your godly friends, and it can come from sources that in just everyday life, So Christian knowledge, that's very important. So add to your faith also Christian knowledge, the knowledge of God, the knowledge of the Lord. And all of us can grow in that. If we can read it all. We can read the Bible, can't we? Keep it as simple as possible. Let's do one more at least, I think. And then to knowledge, self-control. We kind of touched on this a little bit already, but what does that mean? One holding himself in, or one who masters his desires and passions, rather than letting them master him. If you are not careful, this body here can control you. This body that we have is a place that we live. It is what clothes us for now. It is what gets us from here to there. It helps us to be able to not only go where we need to go, but be able to do what needs to be done. Maybe provide an income for our family, and maybe be able to use it to worship the Lord. So, but if your body's in charge, it's not going to want to do any of that stuff. It's going to want to do all the bad things that is not appropriate. So self-control, you need to master. You need to master the self-control. 1 Corinthians chapter 9:25 says, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. So if you're going to compete, and here again, we don't compete with each other, but we compete with ourselves. Who you are today should be much better than who you were yesterday or last year. You need to be the best version of yourself, and the only way that you can do that is beginning with self-control, learning to be in control. 1 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 6 says, your boasting is not good. Don't you know that a little yeast leavens a whole batch of dough? What he's talking about, a little bit of sin in your life, it can actually be very destructive. It's just, try to imagine it this way. And I think if people understood about the body better back then, as far as health is concerned, and about other diseases that are inside of us. I hate to say this, and I don't want to be an alarmist, but did you know all of us have cancer cells inside of us? And you might say, oh, no, I'm okay. I'm not sick. No, I'm not saying that you are sick. I'm saying that all of us have a self-destructive cells in us that if you're not taking care of this body and building up your immunity and staying healthy and strong, those cancer cells are going to take over. And they're going to start growing. So that little bit of cells that are inside you can multiply themselves, and you can really get ill. You can get very sick, and it'll kill you. Again, I don't want to have you worry too much about that, because all of us have them. I have them. It hasn't killed me yet. And I don't want to dwell too much on myself, but I also have a Agent Orange in my blood system. I don't know if I mentioned this to you before. I mentioned to some of you, you know, they accidentally sprayed a lot of us, you know, with Agent Orange, and it's still there. It's inert. And so I said, how can I make sure that it doesn't do anything wrong? He said, well, do what you're doing, and what you're doing is trying to stay healthy as possible. And so that's what I'm doing. But we're talking about spirituality here. We're not talking about the physicality, but I need to make an analogy there. And that's what Jesus used to do. He would try to get you to relate to something that you could understand and relate to something that is spiritual, okay? And in this case, if you are not careful and don't know self-control, don't work on your self-control, then what's going to happen, it is going, you know, eventually things are going to get out of control. So here's what I'm talking about, what we can do, okay? Self-control has 3 parts in here, and this is very practical, common sense sort of things, you know. Monitoring, involving keeping track of your thoughts, your feelings and actions, and not letting somebody else monitor you. Monitor yourself. Think about, what am I thinking right now? Why am I doing that? You got to watch yourself, okay? You got to monitor yourself. Think about how you're doing right now and compare how you did before. I don't know if anybody's done this, you know, I do, especially since I've been around a lot longer than some of you. And that is, whenever I listen to some old song, has anybody ever listened to some old song? An old song for me might be something by about 20, 30 years ago, but some of you might have been 10 years ago or 5 years ago. But when I listen to an old song, I remember what I was thinking back then. I remember how I was feeling back then, about some of the things that were going on back then. And I think to myself, gosh, I'm glad I'm not that guy anymore. That was crazier. So I monitor myself. Okay, I think of myself, and I'm not trying to compare myself to people in my life. I compare myself to myself. So this self-control is not control of somebody else, it's control of yourself. See? So that's the reason why the Lord has thrown that in there as self-control. Because we need to control ourselves. Because if you're not in control of yourself, who's going to control you? And this is the reason why we try to practice control for our children, right? No, you can't go outside right now. It's raining or it's cold. No, you can't eat that. You need to eat the right things, because if you don't, then you're going to spoil your appetite. We do some of those things, right? But we need to do that because kids don't know about self-control. So you got to teach them a little bit about that. But you know what? You better be a good example to them too. There's the other part here, standards. Our guidelines that steer us towards desirable responses. What are your standards, or do you have any? This is where I draw the line, I will say. If it involves this or that, and I know that it's going to violate my high moral code or my standards, I'm not going to do that. I'll give you some practical examples. If I'm watching television, you know, I'm kind of like last night, you know, I'm going through the channels, looking at different things, you know, and then suddenly I see something that's not appropriate. I said, that's not appropriate for my standards, so I changed the channel. Now, there are some people that wouldn't do that because maybe their standards are kind of weak, or maybe they don't exist, or possibly they're too compromising. I'm so afraid that there's just so many Christians today that don't have high standards anymore, that anything goes, everything's appropriate. And when you have a preacher that tells you, I don't care what you do at home so long as nobody knows about it, that's not a good thing. I'm not going to be chasing after you, making sure, looking through your window, making sure you did the right thing. But I'm going to try to tell you that there are standards. There are things we do and things we don't do. And there are things that are higher quality of standards for believers and Christians. I mean, isn't that what we do for our children? We tell our kids, I know those kids do those things, but you don't do that around here. When our kids were little, they'd say, hey, my friends are hanging out till 10 o'clock at night. Why can't I? And I said, because we have higher standards than that. We don't do that. And kids don't understand that. And you need to teach them about those standards. And hopefully they will start making good standards for themselves as well. Strength refers to the energy that we need to control our impulses. There's just so much strength that you can have. Eventually, you're going to have to turn to the Lord and tell the Lord, give me strength. Especially when you lose your patience, when you start, when you stop, when you get to a point where it's beyond your ability to deal with it. I'd say that you need to realize that it's essential to do as much as you can, but beyond that, give it to the Lord, because we know that it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, and I think that a lot of times we don't realize how tough it is in the world we're living in. And I said I was just going to give you this the first half of this thing, because this is more involved in that, and I don't like to rush through these things, So part of my new standards, I'm not going to talk your ear off for the rest of the day, but it's like I had a really good mentor, that I followed, in the beginning, and that was, make sure you speak enough to where they would say, I wish I could hear more, and not speak too much to where they could say, when is this guy going away, and just stopping, The kids are hungry, I've been in churches where we visited, where the kids were, after about way past noon, little kids were crying and were carrying on, and they just wanted to go eat and do whatever. And Mama, can we just go right now? So we want to get away from that. So I got to have standards as well, and I got to have a self-check. And I think we like monitoring. It's a self-check, check yourself, make sure that you're doing the right things, We're not always on the right page, and we're not always doing the right thing. And this is why we need the Lord, So I'm going to close with a word of prayer. We will pick this up next week and conclude. I'll probably do a little bit of review, hopefully for some of the folks that could not be with us this morning, and hopefully we'll get them up to speed with what we're talking about here. But how do we increase our faith? So let's close with a word of prayer, and then I think if Stan might have some music there, we'll just finish with that. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time you've given us to be together as your people. And I know, Lord, that the enemy seems to try to trouble us at times and discourage us from doing the things that we need to do and wanting to serve you, Lord. Forgive us for our weaknesses, and forgive us for not always being as patient as we ought to be. And Lord, be with us throughout the rest of our time in this day of rest, to rest not just from our labor, but from our fears, our worries, our concerns, our doubts. Help us to become the kind of people that has increasing in faith, and to be able to add all these godly elements to our faith so that we can become the strong faith that moves mountains, Lord. Not the mountains around us, but the mountains in our lives, the mountains that are too big for us to overcome. The mountains that are sometimes take the form of our illnesses, our age, the uncertainty of our future, the work that we do, the problems within our families, the loss of our loved ones that trouble us as well. There are many mountains, Lord, that are too numerous to mention, but there are none that cannot be overcome with faith. I pray that you will give us the faith that will move mountains, Lord, greater than a mustard seed, and become the kind of people that are not just believing in you, but trusting in you, living for you, and having the faith in you that will please you. In Christ's precious name we pray. Amen.